want to tell you the craziest, funniest story. Years after I broke up with my toxic, narcissistic ex, he called me and I picked up the phone. He literally was like, "You abandoned me." At this point, I'm like, you know what? I don't care. Let me just add to the plot. Help him color this character a little bit better. Rules aren't meant to be broken. They're meant to be rewritten altogether. If you're ready to play by your own rules, if you are a rebel with a cause, I think you'll love it here. Bring a friend, sit back, and enjoy another episode. Or don't. Remember, you write the rules here. Let's talk about it, love. Hello, my love. Welcome back to another episode of Rima's Rules. Today's episode is going to be all about being in our villain era, specifically through the lens of not trying to control the narrative. I've been seeing this hilarious trend that has been circulating, and it's basically like in my villain era, except something. And the thing that comes after that is always basically something that doesn't actually really make you a villain. It's just you either setting healthy boundaries or learning to say no, holding people accountable. It's things that to any people pleaser would feel so scary and bad and mean. And it's just so incredibly ironic that you would even think that that makes you a villain. And that's actually the entire premise of what it means to be a people pleaser, is that you think that doing things that actually are just things that are healthy and are ways to stand up for yourself makes you this bad person or this villain. And so in that way, I actually really love this whole villain era trend. I really do think it rebrands something that we often thought was so bad or negative or worthy of judgment into something kind of fun and cool. 2024 has actually been my villain era. Like, I don't think I've ever embraced being the villain in someone else's story before this year. It used to terrify me. I used to hate it. And that is actually why I'm the perfect person to make a video like this. I want to teach you the 3 rules that I've learned since embracing being the villain. So, rule number 1 is always a heavy hitter. So I'm just prepping you right now. Rule number 1 is to remember that trying not to be the villain is actually a manipulation tactic. This was something I had to be very painfully real about with myself. I was a people pleaser. And it wasn't actually because I was trying to please people. It was actually because I was trying to manipulate how they saw me. But wait, it doesn't stop there. I manipulated how they saw me because I wanted to make sure that the way that they wrote the story about me and them, whether it was like a bad friendship or a bad business relationship or romantic relationship, I wanted to make sure that the story that they told someone else about me did not cast me as the villain. So when you really, really get honest about that, it's not about being a good person. It's not just about treating people with kindness and respect. It is a self-serving thing to protect your reputation. I know that's harsh to be honest about with yourself, but there is a lot of empathy that you should give yourself if that resonates with you. In the age of social media, now more than ever, your reputation is one of the most valuable forms of currency. Social proof is so important now more than ever. And then when you really consider that with the kind of community that I grew up in, it's an immigrant community. We're very close-knit. We're very collectivist and community oriented. And then on top of that, everyone knows everyone and their mother, literally. News travels very quickly. So I was taught at a very young age, especially as a woman, to protect my reputation at all costs. Now, this had a lot of implications when it came to men and dating and all of that. And that could be another video for another day. But when it came to my social relationships, I did not want to be another story in someone else's mouth. In the same way that people would gossip about other people to me, I kind of could see how things would play out. And I felt like a lot of these stories where I was being cast as the villain or whatever were just due to a misunderstanding. So I was trying to rectify that misunderstanding. And while I think there's nothing wrong with that intention, especially because I am a good person who does treat people with respect and kindness, I wanted to make sure that that integrity was honored in that story. It led to a lot of low-key desperate behaviors of me kind of going against my own boundaries to reach out to someone after maybe they stopped talking to me, to try to like be on good terms with people. It's like things would be so dead between me and somebody, and I would try to resuscitate it like 3 times just so that I didn't feel like they hated me. And when I look back on some of those behaviors, I'm like, number 1, cringe. Number two, this is so not you, Rima. Like, you would never do this when it came to a romantic relationship. Why are you trying to get these people to like you? This is not you. You know your boundaries. You have so much self-respect, and above and beyond all else, you have a lot of dignity. And you trying to reach out and make sure everything is good between someone who has no interest in like giving you that clarity is you breaking your own rules. You don't even agree with what you're doing right now. So really, Rima, why are you doing this? It's not because you're being a good person. Let's be honest. And that's when I realized that I truly believed that every single human being was their own little screenwriter. And every interaction that I had with each person was giving them an opportunity to write me into their little play or movie or whatever. And I wanted to have a say in how I was written because, once again, reputation and social proof was important to me. When I started to get a sense that I wouldn't like the way I was being written, I would do these kinds of people-pleasing behaviors or try to overly explain myself or try to be overly nice to someone who wasn't necessarily giving that energy back so that I could manipulate the way my character was ultimately written. Saying that out loud right now is just crazy because that's a lot of energy. And if you're doing that, my love, that is a lot of energy. Let me just tell you right now, like, let me just skip to the end and let you know you're not gonna, it's just not sustainable. There are too many people and too many opinions. Like, wherever there was an opinion, I was relinquishing power to that person with that opinion. And it got really toxic. Like, I started realizing, like, even the person who they thought I cut them off on the highway, but really, I just really needed to get into that lane. But I would get this anxiety of like, oh my God, this person totally hates me. They just beeped at me. They totally think that I cut them off and I was being rude. Who cares, girl? Who cares? Like, who cares if the person behind you in the random Prius that you're never going to see ever again in your life, who doesn't know your name, thinks that you're an asshole on the road? Who cares about the random kid in high school who started telling everyone you're stuck up when really you were just shy? Who cares about that? Like, these are real stories, but that's the whole point. And I just want you to remember these weird little examples that I'm giving because they show you how not in control you are of the way that people see you. But when you try to control something that you should never really be controlling, it's not your business to control it. You are giving away so much power to people that should never have that power over you. So I did not regain that power that I was giving away to everyone, like Oprah, you get one, you get one, you get one. I did not regain all of that power back until I decided that I quite literally do not give a if I'm the villain in other people's stories. I just stopped caring to control the narrative. And when I stopped caring to control the narrative, things got very fun for me. Which brings us to number two, and that is that villains have more fun. This has been a fun year. I have been the villain. I know I could, just because I've decided to stop trying to control the narrative does not mean I've stopped imagining what those narratives look like. I am quite literally the villain in several stories right now as we speak, and it's so funny. There's like the immature side of things that I'll speak to because like I'm a little bit petty still, and then we'll get to the mature stuff right after that. When you really think about it, every movie would be boring without a villain. And as a matter of fact, this is actually kind of ironic, I think. When I was a little kid, my favorite character in every movie or every show was always the villain. And before you start questioning whether I'm like sociopathic, it was actually because I had so much empathy for them. Really, like I look back on the little version of myself that was so young and cute and was obsessed with Uncle Scar. He was my favorite character in The Lion King. And it was because I genuinely thought he was the most funny and most fun. He also reminded me of one of my evil uncles, so there's that. But he just was sarcastic and funny, but beyond all of that, I truly understood that he felt neglected and shortchanged because he was not next in line to be king. He felt like he was in his brother Mufasa's shadow. So I kind of felt bad for him. The Grinch literally was humiliated and bullied by his whole entire class in front of his crush. And nobody ever apologized to him. So yeah, burn the whole place down. I don't know if you guys paid attention during the Rugrats like I did, okay? But Angelica Pickles had serious mommy issues. Her mom was always neglecting her. And she also low-key had like some sort of eating thing. I don't want to call it a disorder or whatever because the girl was like, I don't know how old, but she was obsessed with cookies. And I completely resonated with that. Like, I had an issue where I would just eat the whole bag of Oreos. So I got it. And then her mom would take away the cookies and she would get upset. And so she would just start taking that out and bullying Tommy and Chucky. So I kind of understood her. And then one last example. Bonnie from Kim Possible was just hot. And so I liked her way more than Kim, and I was always more interested in the storylines where she was part of. But back to the original point, I thought about how I was literally obsessed with every villain. And I did start wondering, like, should my parents have been concerned? Like, was I like power hungry? And the answer kind of is yes, but most children are. I actually decided to look this up because my cousin's daughter is obsessed with, what's her name? It's like the evil character in Frozen. I don't have kids yet, so I don't have to know these things. But she was obsessed with the evil character and she always wanted to like pretend to be her. So I decided to look it up, and it turns out that children feel so incredibly powerless. And so they gravitate to who they believe in these shows and these stories to be the person with the most power, so that they can kind of live vicariously through that power. I just thought that that was so interesting and so cute. But like, if we take that and run with it, they will literally write you into their story as the villain, as the all-powerful person that is oppressing them, because they don't want to believe that they have power in that story. They don't want to hold themselves accountable. They don't want to say what they did right or wrong. That's actually why a narcissist who is like allergic to all accountability will play victim, so that you could be the villain that's making them beat you up, or making them want to cheat on you, or making them want to treat you like shit. They want to convince you that you're the villain and they're the victim, and they don't have power over their behaviors. And so that's like the more serious, mature piece, right? But from like the petty piece, it is fun. Like when you start thinking through some of these storylines where people are legit big mad at you for something that like you didn't even realize you did, it is kind of funny. It is kind of funny, and it's kind of flattering. Like they give you so much power in their lives, and they're just going to keep telling themselves that story. And so when you get to a point where you stop trying to rewrite their stories for them and you realize it's none of your business, all you can do is kind of detach from how it's written. And now it is strictly entertainment, just like TV. Like it is strictly like you're watching someone else's movie and you get to just watch it play out, even though you know it's not true, you know it's not real, you know that it's not based in fact, but it is just entertaining how many different versions of a story people can come up with. I do want to caveat this with saying sometimes you actually are the villain. We're not here for a lack of accountability. There have been things that I've done that were not nice, not good. Like sometimes you are the asshole. Sometimes you are the villain. Sometimes you do need to explain yourself and say sorry and hold yourself accountable. So I just wanted to caveat that not every time you are written as the villain is it untrue. But there are a lot of times where you're written as the villain where it is untrue. The main point here is sometimes people need you to be the villain to maintain their desired position as the victim. Otherwise, their story would not make sense. Which brings me to my last rule, and that is rule number 3. You can and will be the hero and villain simultaneously, depending on who you ask. I want to tell you the craziest, funniest story. Years after I broke up with my toxic, narcissistic ex, I decided to do the thing that I just told you about in rule number 1, where I texted him like a few years later. We hadn't spoken in a few years. I think I even blocked him for at least a year during that time period. So safe to say it was very done, and all of my feelings about the whole situation and about him had just been settled. But I wanted to like control the narrative and not be the bad guy, because I had heard from some people that the way he was telling our story had me written in as the villain. And so me doing what I just told you guys I shouldn't have done, I reached out to try to like open that door of communication and edit the way that my character was written. It was very manipulative, and I didn't realize it at the time. I thought I was just doing what mature, healed people do. He called me, and I picked up the phone once again because he's the screenwriter, and I needed him to edit the way he saw me. So if I could just show up on this phone call in a way where, we're good, then that would be the story that he wrote later on. But it did not go like that, okay? It did not go like that. He wanted to basically try to like tell me all his feelings about how terrible I was and this and that. And he literally said on the phone, it was crazy to me. This was what taught me that people can literally see the same situation in vastly different, even contradictory ways. He's like, you abandoned me. Do you not realize that? And he was dead ass serious, you guys. Like he really thought that. after 4.5 years of toxicity, emotional abuse, manipulation on both sides, to be clear. But the emotional abuse was one-sided. Like, he was very emotionally abusive. He would say things to put me down. He would lie about talking to other girls. Like, there was just a lot of very negative, questionable behaviors that he got caught in several times. So it's not like he doesn't know what he did wrong, okay? But he literally was like, you abandoned me. So I literally responded, because at this point I'm like, you know what? I don't care. At this point I'm the villain. Let me just add to the plot. Let me just help him color this character a little bit better. I was like, if 1 million people read our story, there would not be one person who would title it that you got abandoned. Like, there might be a bunch of different versions of this story, but not one person would come to the conclusion, while being presented all of the facts, that Rima abandoned him. That's just like, are you delusional? Are you crazy? The conversation ended pretty much from there. And we haven't spoken since, because I learned my lesson that that was a stupid thing to do. And I really had no business opening back up a chapter that I had already intentionally closed. But the point that I learned from that, like when I sat back and thought about it, I'm like, the truth is sometimes so much less important than what people believe. I mean, to me, the truth is the most important. But when you're thinking about human psychology and relationships, people are going to see the same situation from so many different angles. If you work in marketing or have been, if you have your own business, you probably know about the story brand framework. And this framework is supposedly the framework that pretty much any good story that you've watched or read pretty much follows. It goes through what we call the hero's journey, where there is a hero. They don't typically start off seeming so heroic, though. They're presented with a problem, and they kind of seem like they're being victimized either by other people, by their circumstances, by a big event that happens at the beginning of the movie. But then they kind of go along this journey to try to solve that problem. And along the way, they find these mentors or guides that are meant to help them, but they also encounter these villains that are trying to prevent them from completing this journey. And then by the end of the movie, most movies, the hero becomes the hero and solves that problem for better or for worse. And the movie is over and we're all happy, right? Perfect example, Lion King. Simba got victimized very early on in the beginning of the movie. He was basically orphaned because Scar killed his dad, and now he has to leave the Pride Lands because the hyenas and Scar are about to kill him. He goes out, he's so sad, he doesn't know what to do, and then he finds Timon and Pumbaa, Rafiki, and they kind of like groom him into the hero that he can be. And then he like crosses the bridge and they're like, Owimboe. You've all watched the movie. It's literally my favorite movie. I've watched it like 1,000,000 times. But anyway, he crosses the bridge, he grows into this lion and he's a hero. And then Nala sees him and she's like, oh my God, you need to come back to the Pride Lands. This is what we've been waiting for. And then he goes and defeats Scar and goes on this amazing heroic journey. So it is very clear from this story for everyone watching, who is the hero? Who is the villain? Who are the guides? And as much as a lot of you, I know, would love to believe that your life is a movie, it is not. Your life is so much more nuanced than a script that someone wrote neatly where they filled in all these characters who are meant to play these specific roles in a specific moment in time. Your life will have all of the above. You will be the villain in someone else's story, like we've discussed. You will be victimized by certain things. You will be heroic and kind of, triumph through all of those obstacles. And you just need to be okay with that nuance. As we speak right now, you are probably the villain in someone else's story. You're the reason why they can't do this or they didn't get that. You are being spoken of potentially in rooms right now as we speak in a way that blames you for someone else's misfortunes. You just need to be okay with that being their story. We all have infinite stories running through our heads right now about all these different things with all these different people. And a lot of these stories are going to contradict the people that we've experienced them with. And that's okay. That's life. That's perception. That's why we all have different perceptions of different events. We all have our own projections and own wounds that are going to color that story so much differently. And that is why someone else's rendition of how things did or didn't happen is quite literally not personal. It is not personal, and it's really just not your business. Even if it is a about you. Learning that it is not your business is going to be the thing that saves you so much peace of mind, and more importantly, so many people-pleasing, cringy behaviors like the ones that I was going through that I described earlier. When you realize that my toxic ex, thinking that I abandoned him, has literally nothing to do with me and everything to do with his daddy issues. And that's like for real. Like that's the part where I actually do feel bad. Like it's not my fault, definitely not my responsibility to deal with. But he had to see me as the villain in that story because he has an abandonment wound. And maybe he's not ready to see all of the things that he did wrong in our relationship, because that would make him wonder if he did something to make his dad abandon him, which no child should ever wonder if they did anything to make their parent abandon them, right? So maybe he's not ready to hold himself accountable with me, and he has to see anyone who leaves him, quote unquote, through the lens of I did nothing wrong. And that kind of, when I say it like that, it kind of adds color to his story too. Like you're here, you probably love me, and you're like ready to like ride for me, right? When you hear that story, like, oh, he's an asshole, he's stupid. But I'm sure that when I just said that, you're kind of now more curious about what his perspective might have been. You're kind of more curious about maybe what his feelings might have been. And this is maybe why I used to like the villains growing up. I don't like the villains anymore. I empathize with them, but I don't aid and abet their bad behaviors. I think that's probably what got me into that type of toxic relationship to begin with, but whatever. Many things can exist at once. Many things can be true at once. Things that are contradictory can also exist simultaneously when it comes to the way people experience and even perceive certain events. And you need to make peace with that and try your best not to try to control that all the time. The most important point here, my love, is that regardless of all these storylines running amok, you need to feel like the hero in your own story. This whole villain era trend relies on the premise that you care about the way you're being cast in other people's stories. And like I said, that's okay. Just because I've unsubscribed from trying to control it doesn't mean I don't get curious here and there how I'm being discussed in those stories. But the main point is that the way they see you or don't see you should never determine how you do or don't show up. You should constantly be asking yourself, how do you see yourself? If what they perceive to be villainous behavior paints you as the victor in your own story, then keep doing what you're doing. And that really requires that you distinguish between their opinions and yours. Their perception does not need to be fact. The way they see you does not need to be the way you see yourself. You need to be able to separate how other people perceive you from the way that you perceive yourself so that you can actually look at your behaviors and decisions and beliefs through a lens that is aligned with who you want to become. If their opinions on how you do or don't show up paints you as the villain, but you see those behaviors as aligned with who you want to become, then let yourself be the villain. You're doing the right thing. It's okay. You might have to be the villain for a while in someone else's story to be the hero in your own. The ones who get it will eventually get it, and the ones who don't will get left behind. And that's all part of the story that you are creating for yourself. You cannot control anything but the decisions that you make, the beliefs that you have, and the way that you decide to show up every single day. I hope that this gave you not just the confidence to set boundaries, do what's right for yourself, really feel like you're in alignment with your own decisions, but I also hope it kind of gave you a different perspective on why other people see you as the villain. It's really not about you. They have their own thing going on. And then here and there, I hope you just have fun with the idea of being someone that you've never been before and doing things in a way that you haven't done it before, because that's kind of the tip that I'm on. And if that requires me to be cast as the villain, then at least that means I'm doing something different and interesting, doesn't it? As always, I will not be asking you to like or subscribe. I know you hear that more than enough. But if you enjoyed this video, bring a friend with you next time. Let's leave people even more powerful than we found them. I love you so much, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.